No one cares about your feelings, and I believe the people that do are usually the people that manipulate them most. Let's go ahead and talk about it. If you're super emotional, this is a problem. It is by far the biggest issue you have. If you're the type of person that doesn't believe that you've ever tried to control somebody else's feelings or rouse them up or get them angry on purpose, I just want you to think about all the times you baited your sibling. I was thinking about one of the fights I had with my sister, and she got up in my face like this close, and I could tell she was trying to bait me. She was screaming at me. We were way too old to be in like a screaming match like this, but I just looked at her and I said, "You'll be all right." And I kissed her on the forehead and just walked around her bad vibes. And the way I completely won that fight was so empowering because I could tell she wanted me to hit her or like yell back and fight and be somebody I didn't want to be in that moment. People are counting on you taking the bait. And today I'm going to explain why we spike these highs and these lows, how to transmute your feelings, how to reclaim your power, and the benefits of not being so emotional. Because I think people think that our emotions are like so important and we need to feel every feeling, and that's just not the truth, okay? You need to sit with your feelings, take a bath, feel it out, cry if you need to, release it. But the longer you hold on to it, the higher you are or the lower you are, the less control you have of yourself, okay? And this is usually what people get off on. They think they don't want to fight. They think they're not toxic, but that's what they're doing. They're literally trying to bait you for a fight. When you give into the bait, you are essentially saying, "You win, here, let's have it." And if you don't believe me, I want you to think back to like school, middle school, high school, whenever. I was a teacher for 10 years. So the first few years I would get like super emotional and I'd hit my peaks and valleys and kids would be like making me get frazzled and upset. And then I realized this is where teachers lose. The worst teachers you could think of, the teachers that had no classroom management, were always the ones that were most sensitive, most emotional, most like, "Well, why are you being like this? Blah, blah, blah." And their face would like get like this and they just get walked all over, trampled on top of. It wasn't until I started standing in my power again. And a kid, let's say, was like acting an absolute mess, trying to bait everybody. Like, there's a difference between a class clown. I love a bad kid that like knows the boundaries and is like, "I'm gonna act a mess," and like, I'm gonna like say a punchline that like might be worth getting written up for, but like it's funny. And I won't ever write those kids up because I respect the intelligence, right? The awareness. But it was always the kids that were just like acting a mess, being loud, screaming, shouting mean things, like being disrespectful. And I would just look at them and be like, "What reaction do you want me to give you? What reaction are you looking for me to give you? Would you like me to yell at you? Would you like me to scream? How would you like me to talk to you for you to listen? Because you're killing the environment. You're making everybody uncomfortable. You're shouting, you're screaming, you're just killing the vibes here. So what are we doing? What would you like to do? And how would you like to handle this? Because I think you're pretty mature. Would you like to go for a walk and walk it off? Or what are we doing? Because if you think I'm going to act out of character because you're acting a mess, you have me messed up. I'm not going to raise my voice at you. I refuse to yell at you. I'm not writing you up because I'm not going to make this my principal's problem." And then in front of everybody, everybody's just like, "What are we going to do, honey?" And they would just sit there and be like, "Wow, like this teacher handled this well." Because other teachers would start yelling at them or "Sit down," and then they would act like they're going to do something, but then they did nothing. And it just becomes like a whole ordeal, and they're feeding this monster. They're feeding this kid that wants to like suck everybody's energy, good or bad. But when you just hit it with a neutral mindset, a neutral energy, they just don't know what to do. They're completely baffled because at home or wherever else, this worked. And I had one student specifically. This student was a handful, okay? One time I told him, "You're not allowed to have a laptop because all you do is play games, and like, let's be honest here. And like, I just can't do that for you." And he would argue and argue and argue with me, and I just stayed completely calm. To the point where I took this, I was like, "You don't get a computer and I'm putting it up. Sorry, like that's what it is." I put the computer up, he grabbed it and threw it on the floor. I still didn't yell. I was like, "All right, how would you like this to be handled?" And eventually I just called the principal to come get him because he was getting violent. But even in the violence, I didn't react. And a lot of people that do this get highs off of your reaction. That's why people that are abusive, people that hit their children, that hit their wives, that hit people, they get off on the fear on your face. They like the peaks and the valleys, the highs and the lows that they can force you to experience. And actually, this is where it gets crazy. They feed off that energy because when you think about it, your feelings are like a thermostat, right? You know where you like your thermostat set. I like mine set at a comfortable 77. You might like yours lower or higher, whatever floats your boat. What I'm getting at here though is that when you spike really high or really low, usually your energy bill goes up and you burn more energy the more you switch and go up and down and up and down. That's what I want us to think of while you're getting heated over somebody else running amok, losing their mind, blowing up. Because all of a sudden you're expending all this energy, and that person, the person that's making you feel all these feelings, highs and lows and whatever, they feed off of your energy. Okay, they're gonna feed off the good feelings you're having. They're gonna feed off the negative feelings you're having. And when they feed off you, some people feed off negative, and you need to be highly aware of who's feeding off the negative feelings. Because those people were probably trained to get their highs like that, but because a lot of times people don't actually care about your feelings, they care about control. They care about using your feelings against you. Unless they're like your mom or something, they usually kind of use your feelings against you. So let's think about somebody that's abusive. If they're yelling, what happens? Your heart races. Even your adrenaline spikes. And probably if they're yelling and you're yelling back, right? It's not even about you, it's about them. If they're yelling at you and then you yell back, you feed that adrenaline spike. They like the weird feelings that you are giving them that aren't healthy per se, but they don't know where else to get that spike, that adrenaline, that excitement. And so they're seeking it from you. That is a dangerous person. That is weird. And when you invite yourself into these arguments, because I had a student that was like, my dad's really toxic, like he'll yell at me. And then like, obviously I yell back, and she like already like just telling me, is like bobbing her head. And I'm like, honey, stop yelling back. He's a grown man yelling at a child. Just sit there and be like, the way you will trigger him more with that, and he can't do anything because you're not fighting back. He can't really punish you. You don't have to give him like roll your eyes or anything, but just say, I never thought about it that way. And you don't have to go and think about it that way, just so you know. If you're hearing somebody out and you're hating everything they're saying, you could just go, I never thought about it that way. Thank you for sharing. And when you say that, you can in your heart say, yeah, and I'm never gonna think about it that way because that was the stupidest take I've ever heard in my entire life. But you could just say it. And you basically cut them off emotionally and take away the response they're used to. So then how are they going to control you? Her dad was used to yelling at her, belittling her to the point where she started yelling at him, calling him names, belittling him to feel better about herself or whatever. But the truth is that all he wanted was somebody to yell at him, talk down to him so that he could get his way. Well, now you're in trouble. You're punished. You're not going anywhere this weekend and you're going to clean the whole house. Well, you could have just asked me to clean the whole house. You didn't have to like yell at me and get me in all this trouble and then ground me and do all this just to make me do what you're going to make me do anyways. Like, that's kind of crazy, right? So you need to start taking your power back, is what I'm getting at. So the benefits of not being so emotional are that you're going to be less easily controlled. You're going to think more clearly. What you are doing without even realizing it is you're spiking cortisol. You're spiking these feelings. And when you're under stress, your heart is racing and adrenaline is pumping, you are not thinking clearly. You are thinking in fight or flight. The main benefit of having emotional control is that you can think clearly. That means that when something's happening that you don't like, that seems really hurtful, that somebody's taking advantage of you or not whatever, this, that, or the other, if you sit in that feeling and go, okay, what are my options? Before you get mad, okay, before you start crying and screaming, you can do that in the bath, you can do that in the shower, you can do that in the car, you can do that with your mom or somebody you trust, but take a moment and sit and go, this is very interesting. What do I want out of this situation? Because I think a lot of us, what we do, especially with our parents or our siblings and stuff, they start yelling at us and we're just such in a cycle of like yelling back and getting in a fight back, blah, blah, blah. And you're not thinking about how do I win? A lot of people are too dumb sorry to call you dumb if you're emotional, but a lot of people are too dumb to sit and go, how can I benefit from this really craptastic situation? All right. Sometimes you're in a very craptastic situation, and it doesn't even have to be a yelling or screaming match. It could be somebody did you really dirty or somebody hurt you. You need to stew in your own crap. But again, when you bring that thermometer back to baseline, you are comfortable. Okay, you're not thinking, oh, I need a blanket, or oh my God, it's so hot, I need water. Like, what am I, right? You're not thinking about that. You're thinking, I'm comfortable. I am okay. I am safe. That's what you're gonna do. When the moment happens, if you are not dying, if there's not a knife to your neck, even if you're being hit, take a deep breath. How do I save myself? Okay, and this is something that I've learned to do in lots of situations. There was one time where I saw a gentleman that was just bleeding out. He just was bleeding out of his arm, standing outside of a fire department, and his arm was just gushing blood. Okay, I pulled over to help him, and he was with his wife. His wife was his wife was freaking out real bad. She was like, I don't know what to do, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I'm gonna need you to take a breath and step away. Very calm, very cool, very collected. If you think about firefighters, when they arrive to a scene, that's how they act, right? Hold your husband's hand, but you need to breathe. And obviously this is the love of your life, whatever, he's bleeding. So I get it. He fell through a glass table, and his arm was gashed. I said, okay, go get the firefighters. She's banging on the door, no one's answering. I sit there and I say, okay, sir, not a problem. Let's go ahead and lift up your arm. Mind you, I have no training other than like being CPR and first aid certified, but I was like, I know that if I put his arm up, the blood isn't going to just be pouring out. It's going to kind of make sense, and I need to clot it. I said, give me your shirt. And I tied it around his arm as tight as humanly possible. Now that we've stopped the bleeding, I'm gonna find a way to break into this fire station. There has to be people in there. It's literally their job to be there 24/7. We're gonna figure this out. So then from that space, I was able to calmly, again, this doesn't even have to be like a crazy situation. I was able to calmly find the firefighters. They finally opened the door, and I was like, hey, can you go help this guy? I'm not trained or certified. I just saw him bleeding on the side of the street, and I need to wash my hands. And they were like, okay. And I walked into the fire station. I'd never been to one. And I was just washing my hands and cleaning myself up. And then I went back into my car. I gave them a peace sign, said, have a nice day. They're like, thank you so much. I'm like, that energy's crazy. Like, have a nice day. And I made sure my thermostat was pretty even keel, pretty regulated, because when you go crazy, when you lose control of your thermostat, you burn more energy than necessary, and you do not think clearly. That's what was happening to his wife. His wife knew once I lifted up his arm, she was like, that's so smart, obviously. Why didn't I think of that? And she's like, oh my God, make it tie in his shirt. She's like, why did I think? And then she was like crying. She's like, why did I think of that? I'm so mad at myself. That's exactly what I'm saying. You guys are not slowing down to think. A lot of us get emotional and we get overly excited and freaked out and worried, and then we're not thinking clearly, and we're acting in ways that are irrational, that don't make sense, and that are actually hurtful to not only us, but sometimes those around us, because we're feeding them back. Sometimes bad energy that they don't need. Sometimes we're not thinking clearly enough to help the people we love in a way that makes sense. And that is why being emotional is not to your benefit. Having emotions is normal. Having emotions and sitting with them and reflecting on them and using them as a tool to teach you privately is important, or with your mom or with your best girlfriend or something like that is beneficial. But stewing on them and sitting in them all the time is not healthy for you, and it's not helping you go forward and move meaningful in any direction. And it is above all else giving people access to you and access to the deepest parts of you, to the energy that's stored inside of you, good or bad, in ways that maybe they don't deserve. On that note, stop being so emotional and learn to transmute those feelings, honey. We'll talk about transmutation in another video. I thought we'd get to how to transmute your feelings. I basically told you how to like even yourself out, but I'm gonna talk in another video about how to take those bad feelings if they're still stirring up and if you feel like you're stewing in it. I'm gonna teach you how to transmute them and change it into something that's positive and beneficial with concrete examples so that you don't feel alone. All right, take care. Mwah.